Good morning, good afternoon, good evening as we wait for people to join us, and welcome to Chart Chat. My name is Steve Wexler. I am the founder principal of Data Revelations. I am a professional chart looker-outer. I am the author of The Big Picture, and along with Andy and Jeff, the author of The Big Book of Dashboards. And with that, I will pass things over to Jeff Schaefer.
Hello, everybody. Jeff Schaefer here, Chief Operating Officer and VP of IT and Analytics at Unifun in Cincinnati, Ohio. I also teach data visualization at the University of Cincinnati, where I'm adjunct professor and joining the faculty in August, full-time professor there. And I will apologize now for my scratchy voice. I am recovering from COVID. The COVID was good, but the COVID pneumonia, not so good. So I am coughing, and I will try hard not to cough in the mic. Amanda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda McCulloch. I'm a health data visualization designer based in Washington, D.C., and also serve as the executive director of the Global Data Visualization Society. Excited to be here chatting today with my colleagues and with the special guests who we have joining us. Steve, back to you.
Let's bring it over to Andy.
Andy, so sorry.
Don't forget about me.
Oh,
Hi, everybody.
I thought I was last in the list today.
You had one thing to do.
It's fine. Anyway, hi, everybody. I'm Andy Cotgreave. I'm lead evangelist at Tableau, co-author of the Big Book of Dashboards, coming to you from a very, very hot and sweltering Oxford in England. Great to see you all. Let us know in the comments where you are tuning in from. Back to you, Steve, I think.
And if we could get back with the slide deck, Amanda, thank you so much. So it is more than just chit chat. It's certainly not church chat. It is chart chat. You are encouraged to join the discussion and debate. If you're looking where to find that in the live stream, upper right corner, depending on your layout, it's either upper right corner or below. You can say show chat. And with the three dots, you can also pop these items out if you would like to. Our goal here with all of these chart chats is to inform, engage, and entertain you. I cannot think of a more important subject that we've put together in the 3.5 years that we've been doing this. And I'm very pleased to have Seth Godin and Jasper Kroom here. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about, or Seth is going to talk about, the Carbon Almanac. It's the book and the movement behind it. The thing that has resonated the most with people who have attended chart chats is seeing how is it that people put these charts together, whether it is Rosamund Pierce from The Economist, whether it's John Byrne Murdoch from the Financial Times, Joss Fong from Vox.com, seeing where they started, the iterations where they ended up with. For chart enthusiasts, it gets no better than that. And the person who led the chart team, Jasper Kroom, is going to lead us in on some deep dives with this. People will ask me, who knows Seth Godin? Well, we have an interesting backstory on how we all met Seth, and a little clue is that oddly shaped item that's over there. Our hope is that you are completely galvanized by what you hear today and want to do something about it. And we're going to end with Seth to discuss, well, here's what you can do. And we hope you will stay for the after party where you can chat directly with our guests. That's the URL for this. We'll put that up again later. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Seth to discuss a little bit about how the Carbon Almanac came about and how you recruited 200 plus people to help you write this thing. So, Seth.
Thank you, Steve. I am not going to talk for long because Jasper's the star of today's show, but I'm thrilled to see Joe and Bruce and Jeffrey and Livia and Jamie and all the people who are here in the comments, because you are the kind of people who understand understanding, that you are in the business of helping others understand. And after 20 bestsellers, I am now a volunteer, an organizer. We created this book right here. Oops. Comes out in the Netherlands on Tuesday, in North America on July 12th. It is a book of understanding, because if we can't talk about it, we can't make things better. And the scary part of doing this project wasn't that I wasn't going to be able to find people who wanted to chime in. 300 people in more than 41 countries worked together to build this 100,000 word illustrated, fact-checked, footnoted book in less than 5 months. The scary part was that we would create something that people would be confused by and not understand. And I was so lucky to meet Jasper and his colleagues and the people who contributed, because for the first time, when people touch this, they get it. And only after we get it do we talk about it. And once we talk about it, then we can create systemic action. So I'm here because I love information design and understanding. I wrote one of the very first books about website design a very long time ago. I have strongly held strong views about how we get people to understand. And over to you, Jasper.
Indeed, Jasper, if you could say, how did you get involved with this thing? And then how did you end up in the position of being the cat herder of all the chartists that were there? This was a opinionated and lively bunch. And I will say ahead of time, you were masterful at organizing and galvanizing this team. So give us a little bit of your background and how you got into this thing.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, first off, just it's a pleasure to be here alongside this group. It's funny because I'm going to be talking about leadership and making charts with people who actually wrote the books on leadership and making charts. So I'm going to try to stay within in my lane, but if I step out, we'll see what happens. Should be fun though. So I've been subscribing to Seth's daily email for years now. And back in October of last year, Seth sent out an email saying, hey, I'm working on this thing called the Carbon Almanac. If you're interested, fill out this Google form. I had just had my morning coffee, so I was like, yes, I'll do it. Type, send. Then I proceeded to go on with my day, completely forgot about filling out the form, moved on with my life. 16 days later, October 22nd, 2021, I get an email from Seth. Hey, I'd love to have you join us. My mind was blown, right? So it's at that point, things actually became real. And that's when I started to actually step into the Carbon Almanac. One of the first things they had you do when you join is say who you are, what you're interested in, how you feel you can contribute. So one of the things I said was, I really like data viz. I know some D3. Like, how can I help? And thankfully, I had another D3 acolyte in Corey Girard there, and he had taken sort of the first leap with the data visualization and the charts within the Almanac. So we started a very quick rapport, and I stepped into building some of the initial charts. It was amazing. It was such an engaging, enjoyable experience, iterating over these charts and these ideas. I was using D3 and Observable to get to these sort of SVG outputs that we would then get feedback on, iterated on again. It was great, but it was not fast enough. We're cranking out about a chart a week. And I don't know how many articles we ended up with, Seth, if it was around 200. Is that something like
Probably 200 is a good number, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so doing one a week, 200 let's assume one for each article. That's 4 years. That's not fast enough. So in December, Corey and I pivoted to a slightly different model. So instead of individual, just like everyone creating charts in their own lanes, I became sort of the chart creation coordinator. So I was coordinating our chartists, if you will. So it was scary at first because I've never managed anyone. So that was my first sort of apprehension. But then what everyone helped me to realize is that no one's managing anyone at the Carbon Almanac. We're all working together. We have people who are coordinating action and everyone's giving each other feedback, but there's no management there. And as soon as that clicked, it became a lot more clear how I could help and how I could contribute. So there were two things I tried to focus on. One was building out an efficient workflow for the charts, which we can talk through the tactics of that. That's not as interesting to me, though, as actually how we harness the energy of this group, of the Carbon Almanac, to create the most elegant charts we possibly could. So there were a few things. There were a few traits that all of our chartists shared. And I'm emphasizing chartists because I love puns and I love dad jokes. That felt good. It feels good. So I'm just going to keep hammering away at it. All of our charters were eager, right? Everyone who's there wants to make a difference, cares about the environment, cares about climate change, is concerned about the way things are going. So everyone has that impetus to contribute. Everyone's interested in the articles and the concepts. When you pick up the Carbon Almanac, the articles in this book are fascinating. There's things from cricket burgers, solar radiation, rising sea levels. We talk about the IPCC. There's some amazing art in there as well. There's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of interesting topics. And then everyone in the Chartist group had data viz or chart creation as a side skill, right? So there weren't any specific data viz developers. There wasn't anyone whose day job was just to create charts all day. Everyone knows how to make a bar chart in Excel, or maybe they do some work with Tableau, or maybe they like mess around with D3, but no one had it as their daily, like, this is what I do every single day. And lastly, but most importantly, everyone was really kind. And it sounds warm and wooey and hand wavy, but it's actually very important when you're having an engaging, yes, that's right, it can be a team sport, especially when everyone's kind, because what that means when you know that everyone around you is kind and cares is you can have a much more rigorous discourse without getting people's feelings hurt.
I want to augment that or amplify that. So if you're curious, Seth, you had us using Discourse as the open source tool for being able to communicate with each other. The discussions that were going on this thing, and I know, Jasper, you're going to show some of them, were lengthy, passionate. No, I think we should do it this way. And everyone had the same goal, which is we're just trying to make the best, clearest, most, the thing with the greatest impact. There were very little ego involved, and it was all about what is the thing that is going to, yes, now I see it, now I get it. That said, you still have
I want to just highlight one thing here, which is one of my signal contributions to this whole project is from the first day, the rule is you have to be kind. And there were people who just didn't know how to be kind, and they were asked to leave the project quietly, and they disappeared. That I knew we could do this and be kind at the same time.
Yeah, it was more than just a side attribute to the people in the project. It was sort of a core skill, right? Kindness is something that helps you succeed when you're working with people you've never met before and might never meet in person. One of the things that happens when people are working on something that they care about so much is they want to make every single chart an ode to climate change, right? They wanted everything to stand out on its own as this immaculate piece of art. And while art is part of the word chart, it's not how we would contribute correctly to the almanac. So one of the things I wanted to help drive is that TCA, the Carbon Almanac, needed a rhythm group, needed a drum section, right? We needed our charts to give the readers a sense of rhythm throughout the entire book, a common voice, something that they could go back to page after page as they're reading about cricket burgers on one page and solar radiation on the next page. They needed something that they could relate to so that they were comfortable as they were flipping through. If we were to give them one chart styled a certain way, another chart styled a different way, that would really create this sense of discord and kind of break the flow throughout the book. So I posited that to the group as we need to be the rhythm section for the almanac, and I think that helped to drive a lot out of the goals around simplicity and kind of making things easy to consume. So one of the key quotes, I sent out a weekly sort of update to our charts group, and every week I had a quote that resonates with me. And one of my favorite quotes of all time, I actually wrote it down here so I say it right, is perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. I think that's something key for the almanac, for anyone making charts, data visualization. It'd be the quote is to the author of Le Petit Prince, and it's so key though, because you can add in x-axis and a y-axis and a second y-axis and a label for every single circle, and you can add in a lot of information. But if you add in too much information, you lose the insights that come from the chart. So Our goals with these charts were really to drive home what the key takeaways were from the articles that we were supporting, and really for the charts to exist in support of the articles that they were sitting next to. So what I was hoping to do is walk through some of the charts, some of the prompts we got throughout the process, throughout the experience, kind of take it from what the first request was, what some of the early iterations were, and where we ended up actually on the page. As I go through this, I'm not going to treat this as like a rote presentation. So anyone, if you have questions, just shout and we can stop and talk through stuff there. Yeah. So okay. First off, you can see across the background there, a handful of different chart types. We did everything from line charts to horizontal bar charts. We had some projections. There was all sorts of stuff, which made it really fun. Really engaging throughout the entire process. One of the first ones we went through was measuring out solar energy by latitude. So the takeaway we wanted to get across is that the solar energy absorbed by the Earth is different at different latitudes. That was kind of the key takeaway. First thought was, let's do it in a horizontal.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Yes.
I can't help
yes.
myself. You just said something really important that you glossed over. Almost never do people who are in this line of work start by saying the key takeaway should be blank, because they don't want to be on the hook. They just want to say, oh, it's just what it is. Figure out what you want. And, you know, the obvious exceptions are in popular media where they don't use data. They just say what the takeaway is. But what you created the pattern for was, if it's doesn't have a takeaway, there isn't going to be a chart.
Exactly. Cool. Thank you. Yeah. So, and what that helped to do as well was to root the conversation with the different chart artists on, like, yes, this chart's great, but it doesn't serve the takeaway, right? Because that's the thing. When you're giving feedback to people around their creations, you want to have specific goals, right? You can't move the markers from people creating charts. It's like, I don't really like this. Can you try it again? If you have a key takeaway and that key takeaway is true, then when the chart serves that takeaway, there's no, like, I can't say, hey, this does exactly what I asked you to do, but I need you to change it, right? So the approach with this first one was we wanted to show that insulation is stronger the closer you get to the equator. I was thinking horizontal bar chart is great because we have a list of the different latitudes as well as numbers, right? So this is what we had to work with. Nice little table of data. Look at that, beautiful. Doesn't that get the point across? So we thought a horizontal bar chart might be a good way to take this. This was the first iteration. So Mayank did this awesome viz where you can see very quickly something really cool stood out. Look at the curve of those bars. It kind of matches the curvature of the Earth, right? This is one of those things where, like, the magic of seeing something as a chart instantly popped, and it still does. Still brings a smile all over my face looking at this every time.
It's Jasper. It's a funny one though. The pattern's clear, but my eyes, it hurts my eyes.
Speaking of patterns,
yeah.
No, those
the Marais pattern. Why a Marais pattern is strong in this chart?
It is.
Yeah,
it is. And that's one of the things when we get to the final version, we clean it up a fair amount. This was the very first version that Mayank set across, which again shows that the people who were contributing had this innate sense of, like, what should be in a chart. So yeah, so the way the process worked is someone would submit their first iteration. Anyone in the Almanac had an opportunity to give feedback. So Seth chimed in and said, "Isn't physics great?" Yes, it is. But this is something that's so key when you're creating charts, is adding the human context, right? Adding something that your readers can latch onto. If we look back at this first version, we're just showing it by latitude, right? That was my idea. It's like, oh yeah, if you're at 60 degrees, it's this. If you're at 0 degrees, it's that. Didn't point out 0 degrees is the equator. There's nothing to really latch onto unless if you know the exact latitude that you live at. So Seth brought up a great idea. What if we added some cities to the left, so you could actually, like, pin in, like, what the solar energy is at that specific location. a given point in time during the year, because obviously seasonal fluctuations. So we took this iteration. There's some good things and some bad things here, right? And this is one of the great things is we gave feedback throughout. So you can see we've got cities here. So there is that you can kind of key into it. Some things we didn't like about this version is we changed the x-axis, so it starts at 8, so the curve's more pronounced, gets the point across. But then there's the concept of like being as truthful with the data as possible. And this is one of those things where if you start at 8 versus start at 0, you're not really gaining anything in what you're getting across. You're losing credibility with some people who are looking to find a way to lose credibility with the chart, if that makes sense. So we did some more iterations, and this is what we ended up with in the chart. So we got rid of the latitudes entirely, honed in on the cities. We changed the bars from bars to just lines because the point is in the length. And then we placed the numbers at the end. So you still have that curvature. It's a lot cleaner, right? There's a lot less, if we think about the data to ink ratio, it's a lot more favorable on this chart versus this. Yeah, so this is where we ended up with this. And then I'll show how it ended up in the book itself.
And
so
Jasper, I've got a question. Something else you just glossed over there is you said the challenge of designing charts so that you don't lose credibility against those who are naysayers. Yes. So that climate change, there's a lot of naysayers. So how did you incorporate that into the process of the almanac?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that was one of the things that Corey and I were really cognizant of at the start, and we tried to carry on throughout the whole thing. Is that people are going to look for reasons to say, like, look, you're an alarmist, or look, you're making this up. The x-axis starts at 8 as opposed to 0, right? So it's a total red herring. It doesn't change the fact that climate change is real, but if we were to be perceived as untruthful, if people think that we're trying to lie with our charts, because you can lie with charts, and we always made the point to prioritize truth over everything else, right? So any opportunity to be perceived as trying and hide something or to cover over something with our charts, we had to be vigilant about sniffing those out and getting rid of them. So there's another great example of that further on, and Seth and I had an awesome back and forth on it. But yeah, so that's something important, is being as truthful as possible, just with the idea that if you're not, you could actually help the entire book lose some of its punch.
Yep.
I'm really struck by the fact that as you look at this kind of view, and if you even go back to the bars that you had, as I think about the word chartist and people who might embellish charts more, I could see putting like, a picture fill behind this so that you see like the globe sitting behind it or something else. And I think the decision that you made is a really nice example of this point around kind of not focusing on where there's nothing to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And exactly. I remember that when in some of the chats we had before this, if I recall, the book started out with the option to be color and switched over to grayscale, correct? So can you speak to kind of how that might have influenced some of these design decisions in terms of simplicity?
Yeah, I was going to save that for a little bit later, Amanda, but why don't we go into this now? Because, right. Jasper, you got involved in October, and you've probably pretty much done by February, about midway through this book that was going to be in color, you suddenly find out it's not going to be in color. And what happened with that?
Yeah, so that actually ended up being a hidden blessing for the chart artist group, at least, because it forced our hand in simplicity, right? So it forced us to go from adding color as another dimension by which to encode data, right? So you could, if you have the ability to use color, then you can say, this is green, this is red, I know, or this is blue, this is orange, and so we know that because these are different colors, these mean different things. As soon as you lose that, we still had the ability to use grayscale, which we used really well in certain charts. But it forced us to get even further to kind of the base spinal cord of people's perception of data, right? You perceive size and position a lot even faster than color. So it forced us to be more simple with our charts, which in turn I think helped guide our charts to be easier to perceive and understand.
If I could chime in a couple of things. The first one is all charts lie. The map is not the territory. If you're in the business of drawing a map, there's a reason. And that's because you couldn't fit the whole territory onto a piece of paper. You are making choices. You have listed the cities, but not the gas stations. Why did you do that? You have a point. And what we decided is that our slogan is don't take our word for it, you can look it up. And so what it means to say a chart is true is simply that when you look it up, you will not see something that you wish we had shown you in the original chart. For the troll who wants to have an argument, that's in room 7 down the hall. We don't have arguments here from people who just want to have an argument. But for people who seek to understand, here is a way to get the joke. And if there isn't a joke, it's not worth taking your time, and it's not worth printing it on paper. And Steve and Jasper and I were 3 of the people involved in the color decision. It turns out that supply chain issues, cost issues, et cetera, made it so that it was going to be very hard to have this thing published in many countries around the world and command that they use multiple colors. And that constraint ended up being a boon. I think we came out ahead because of that.
Agreed. So the next chart, and this is another awesome. This was a great experience. So we wanted to convey the likelihood of severe weather across different scenarios. So we were thinking about the magnitude of event, the type of event, and the likelihood of event. So 3 distinct variables. I even, when I posted this out to the group, usually I would say, I'm thinking horizontal bar chart, but for this one I said wild card, because I had no clue what to do. What we usually did is when we had an article that we were supporting, whoever wrote that article had done some research, and in doing research, invariably they would have run into a chart of some sort. So in this case, the writer of the article had actually done a screen grab of a chart from the IPCC report, which is a periodic report basically on the state of climate change, right? So you can see this multicolored small multiples chart over here. I'm not zooming in on it because we'll go to what the takeaway is from it. But the main takeaway is these things are more likely to happen over time if the global average temperature continues to rise. So I had some initial ideas like, hey, let's try this or that. But again, I said, this is an all play. I'd love to hear your ideas. So the first batter to the plate was our friend Vivek. So Vivek had the idea of doing a bubble chart with the y-axis and an x-axis, and circles sized by I think magnitude of event. But Vivek, even in posting this, he said, I am not happy with this. So it was like, great. Oh, okay. It sort of broke the seal, right? So that happened. So everyone then felt comfortable contributing ideas. So big shout out to Vivek for showing up and showing his work, but then also being vulnerable enough to say, like, I don't really like this, but let's at least start here. So I chimed in. I said, hey, how about this idea? We have this this is the likelihood of the event, and then this is the severity. So again, trying to get it across. It didn't resonate. It was one of those great things where the idea sounds great in your brain, and even as you start. So I just typed out the chart, right? Just using Markdown. Even as I was doing that, I was typing. I was like, this is dumb. This doesn't make sense. But might as well share it to help keep the conversation moving forward, right? So again, going back to the team being kind, look at the first line here. Alberto says, please forgive me, but I don't understand your proposal. Like, this is great, but I don't know what you're asking for. So he then chimed in with this awesome idea. So before I was saying, like, okay, if something's twice as likely, let's say, then show 2 dots. But what he came up with the idea was to add more dots. And then, so that gives you more of a sense of the scale. So if something's 2.4 times as likely, maybe instead of going from 1 to 2.5, go from 10 to 24. So what Alberto shared, and this just broke it wide open, is this, which is such an awesome idea. This is another one of those charts that even when I see it in the book or here, I smile, right? You see Seth nodding too. This was so much fun to have this pop up, right? This was right before Christmas. This was a fun little Christmas gift to open up. So what we have is on the, and I'll actually click forward to this next one so you get the full sense of it, is comparing so from 1850 to 1900, a 10-year weather event would have happened once every 10 years, right? So if we think what that means is, let's say a heat wave of this magnitude would have happened once a decade. So presently we're 1 degree Celsius above that. So it's happening 2.8 times as much, right? Yes. Do the math real quick. So we're basically going from 10 dots in 1850 to 1900 to 28 dots here. Now we're going to 41 dots if the temperature rises to 1.5, 56 if we go to 2 degrees, and then 94% more likely if we go to 4 degrees. So this gets across very quickly. You're a lot more likely to get one of those big black dots if the temperature continues to increase. And then, so this helps. Again, this gets that point across in a way that, like, as you're looking from left to right, you're saying, oh, there's more dots. Oh, there's more events. Oh, this is happening more frequently. One of the things that Alberto did with this, which I love, is he went with the random placement of dots as opposed to stacking them in an ordered manner, because that gets a point across that we don't know when this is going to happen, right? This is nature. It's not completely predictable. You don't have a sense of like, okay, tomorrow or next year, there'll be a big black dot. There may or may not be, but all we know is as temperatures continue to increase, it's a lot more likely that it will happen. And the way it ends up on the pages here, that big white space you see in the middle is the page break, right? This is the left and right. So it's in support of this article. So again, having, like, simplifying the charts down from those 3D spheres from my, like, markdown text to this means that, like, as you're reading this article, the eye naturally darts back and forth, right? So you're reading the words, and these charts actually help to underscore it even as you're reading it. So then you read it, your eyes take a break, you look, and you see, wow, like temperature, that's going way up. Drought is going way up. Precipitation also going up. So again, it's the purpose of the charts was to support the articles. So I'll take a breath there.
Jasper, I want to ask you about that. You know, the random versus the stacking. Jeff, okay if I share your women in American orchestras?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just in case people are wondering, well, what do you mean by, you know, random dots for stacking them? So let me just add this to the stream. So we've seen this approach, and Jeff, you've done it so brilliantly on a number of chart chats, but here the comparisons are easy to make. You can see how many more dots, etc. So this is an example where, all right, it's stacked as opposed to randomly. So Jasper, were there just, you know, were there debates and arguments about this, or were people, no, we think the idea comes across with the?
Well, actually, you're both right? So Jeffrey was right, because this is intentional actions taken by intentional humans, and it shows intent. Whereas what Alberto and Jasper were able to show is that weather isn't intentional. Climate is responding over a trend line. But the weather, which is what is going on here on any given moment, is a random draw from a basket full of balls. And what this is showing is that the number of balls in the basket changes, but what you're going to get, it snowed in Mexico City this week. No one could have told you that was going to happen 3 months ago, because it's a random weather event.
I love that.
Nice.
There's a really interesting question from Galen around kind of feedback on what people think about this chart with the random distribution and the pattern, and the question about showing the base kind of 10-year numbers and what that looks like as you were thinking about kind of relative comparisons. Is that something that came into your conversations?
Yeah, and you see in the end article, that's actually what we ended up bringing in. So sorry for bearing the lead with saying we ended that last one, but this does actually incorporate that baseline. So you can see this is how it used to be, right? And then this is at present, and this is how it's progressing. So again, it does show that trend line with that base, because again, it's just like showing the full x-axis, right? You're telling more of the story to help incorporate the context of where we are today and where we may be headed.
Yeah, I think the base helps a lot. I had kind of the same question looking at it, but looking at the final view, I think that it helps a lot to have that starting reference point that then you get to compare back to. And it is funny how the random distribution makes looking at the comparison of base versus the next one over a little bit harder versus having it be stacked and more organized. But I think, Seth, your points were spot on about kind of the random occurrence of weather events, and that you get that kind of sentiment and feeling from looking at the chart organized this way.
The other nice thing about incorporating that base is you can see in the lower right hand corner on this slide, we have 50-year temperature events. So that's twice every 100. So we're actually able to incorporate within the same chart context something on a different scale. So this is one where the severity of the event might be higher, and that's why originally I pushed for measuring out the severity as well. But we decided to focus on the 10 years for the most part. But having the 50-year here, we're still able to tell that same story, right? Like there's more balls in the bucket than where we started. And again, I think with the random, one of the nice things is when it's in support of an article, you can kind of go cross-eyed, right? You can kind of look off in the distance and squint your eyes at it, and you can see like, okay, there's more from left to right. So while it's harder to maybe tell the difference between like 1.5 times as likely and 1.6 times as likely, as you look at the trend from left to right overall, you see that it's increasing across the different scenarios. But yeah, agreed that ordering it does make it easier to kind of tell the difference between, let's say, like 28% and 32%.
So I've got a question. So how am I going to frame this? Right. So as we've spent longer talking about these charts and understanding the data that's representing, that the right-hand arrays of lots of black dots is increasingly scaring me, right? And so that's success. But it's taken 4 or 5 minutes to delve into the data, to think deeply about it, and for me to get to that point. It's like, wow, the more I look, the more I think about it. And you know, how do we? There's a lot of data visualization about climate change already. You know, how it's one of those challenges. How do you punch the message home? Should we be punching the message home in some instant chart, or are we trying to get people to dwell and think and consider? And you know, can we tweak our visualizations to do that?
Yeah,
that's a great question. Go ahead, Jesper.
I was just going to say a lot that's a great call. I was probably going to say the same thing as you said. One of the things we ran into over and over again with the charts around the data is everything is up and to the right? Every single chart, if you look at it, is a hockey stick curve up and to the right. So, and when you look at this book, you'll see that over and over again, sea level rise, CO2 parts per million, temperature, it's all up and to the right in that hockey stick curve. So, and we do hammer that home throughout the process. This helps to give an additional sort of dimension to that. So there's definitely, and when we look at this next chart, actually, if let's see, I'll actually skip forward to that if that's okay with everyone. Just comparing the, oh, that's not the end. Oh, why is it? Okay, yeah. Okay, so CO2 parts per million and the Dow Jones, both are up and to the right. Both until very recently had been hockey sticks, right? So with this, we were again trying to say like, hey, look at this. We're going up and to the right. So this was another approach to the almanac where sometimes it was research. We wrote this article. We need some data, or we need a chart to support it. Other times it was, hey, I have this idea. Here's an initial sketch of it. Can you take this and run with it? And this was a perfect example. So set the thought like, hey, let's map these two out across the same time series and see how it shows. And you can see there's definitely some correlation there, right? So I took it and at first, said, okay, let's do that. This looks great. It gets the same point across. It's clean. It has that same style. Great. Thinking about it more though is one of the things. So I sent this out on like a Friday, and then I thought about it over the weekend because no one thinks about their work over the weekend, right? One of the challenges that I thought about was the fact that the y-axis here starts at 300. So I thought, I don't know about that. Going back to our conversation about where we start the axes, someone could point to that and say, hey, you're starting the y-axis at 300 here. This chart's a lie. Climate change isn't real. So I raised those concerns, and I said, that's great, Jasper, thank you. But CO2 parts per million over the past like hundreds of thousands of years have always been around 300. So very, very graciously said, thank you, Jasper, but actually you're wrong. So that was great to hear, right? Because again, it goes back to how we were kind throughout our interactions and throughout our conversations. We were able to raise concerns, say, like, hey, I'm not sure about this, because the responses we would get back were always constructive and open. So this was my next take, right, of saying like, hey, if we start with the y-axis at 0, like, it doesn't really get the point across as well, right? But then going back to thinking, okay, parts per million for like eons before had been around 300,000, right? I think it averaged around 275 parts per million. So if we go back in time, let's say to 1800 or 1799, which was the earliest time you could find for measuring CO2 parts per million, that still had the context of the Dow Jones in it, then you can start to see that same idea again comes across. And so, Andy, to your point of like up and to the right, and like we should have stuff that's more instantly alarming. This is one of those ones that is more instantly alarming, right? You can see CO2 parts per million, even just 1800 and 1900. Pretty stable, right? You see like a slight climb caused by volcanoes and just other like minor human activity. Then you go from 1900 to 2020, and you start to see that hockey stick curve, right? And then as an interesting aside, look at how this compares at the same time to the Dow Jones, right? So not saying that the Dow Jones caused climate change, but at the same time as like civilization becoming modern, the modern world, look at what's happening. So again, getting that point across of like, we should be alarmed, right? Something's happening, guys, but look at all these different ways of explaining it, as opposed to showing, I think we've all seen the charts from an inconvenient truth, right? So you've all seen the up and to the right, and that image, that chart has been kind of burned into everyone's brains at this point. So one of the things we wanted to get across with this book was like, there are a lot of dimensions to this, and it's not just one big problem, right? It is a big problem, but there are many sort of multivariate sub problems within it that you can work towards to help change things. And I think again that's one of the things we try to get across with Almanac,
because we're focusing on this at the moment. This 412 parts per million, whatever this number of parts per million of carbon is a running theme throughout the book. And if you could maybe show some of the other charts and maybe move to that unit chart, which
definitely
tries to explain the difference between 300, 400, and 500 parts per million.
Yeah.
And this
is the first chart of the entire book, not on the first page. It is one of the only charts that I helped create, because in my head I said the reason we need an almanac is so that this chart has a place to go.
Right. Yeah. So this again gets that point across. That it like per million, right? It's such a small, the change from 4 to 5. It's not that great in the context of all the dots. Yeah, so again, so this is another view to that same narrative. Just instead of it being over time, it's like we pivoted it not 90 degrees. So you're looking at this is where we're at right now.
So for those, when you get the book or you go to the website or read that is 400 or 500 parts per million. There are 10,000 dots there rather than a million. And we're talking about the difference between 3, 4, or 5 per 10,000. And the unit chart shows up. So you're certainly going to see bar charts. You're going to see line charts. You're going to see slope graphs. But some of the most effective I've seen in this have been the unit charts. So maybe we can move to that and the interesting discussion of nuclear and coal, and something that Jeff discovered when he was looking at life expectancy in the United States.
Great. So Jasper, while you cue that up, can I just answer Jeffrey's question that he just posted? Because
Yes.
I think that this is important to note. When we started working on this, most of the people on the project thought that we could recycle and reduce our way out of the current problem. And what became clear is that we live in a world that has been defined by industry. Industry made 1 billion or more people wealthier beyond anyone's measure. Industry is why the Dow Jones has gone up. Industry is why we're sitting here being able to talk the way we're talking. And industry has been fueled, literally and figuratively, for 150 years by a fuel that has been underpriced. And in fact, climate change and the Dow are related because one causes the other, which caused the first. The digging stuff out of the ground enabled industry, and industry enabled climate. So the systemic change that is required, that is essential to put on the table, is in that chart. We are not saying that you can put in any given year they're related. What we are saying is the very thing that built the world that we depend on is the thing that caused the climate to change.
So
Yes.
the want to underscore something in reading this book. There have been a number of things I've changed my behavior, and working on some of the charts about finding out the degree to which cattle impacts the environment. Milk versus alternative milk sources, the amount of land, the amount of water, and the amount of carbon and methane emitted. The wall warts, these things that you leave on all night and that are drawing power. These things, reading this and working on the charts, it's changed my behavior. Jasper, maybe you can talk about this a bit later. Look, working on this book, you've changed your career because of it. And so I'll be surprised if it doesn't have an impact. In any case, what you're looking at was one of my late attempts. This was showing the number of deaths caused from different energy sources per terawatt. So per terawatt of coal, this many people die. Per terawatt of oil, this many people. And nuclear, it's really small. And I had a bunch of experiments with tree maps with giant bubbles and a little tiny bubble, etc. And then as I was walking out the door, I said, "Oh, you know what? I bet you a unit chart in the right hands." And there's so many good unit charts in this book in the right hands. And I contacted Corey and Daniela and said, "Hey, here's by the way, those little dots there, they're actually human figures. They're little, isotypes or pictograms that are there. Go to the next slide and showing the difference between death rates from energy production, coal versus nuclear." And that Daniela and Corey came up with wait a minute, why don't we just focus on the largest one and the smallest one to really drive this home? And it was, this is what happens when you put it in the hands of, a really good designer and take it. And also, what can they take away? And they took away things that took away from understanding the massive difference here. So very effective use of unit charts that are there. And Jeff, when you saw this, the death rates from energy production in coal, it reminded you of something that you had worked on pretty recently, correct?
Yeah, it was a viz a couple years back from Josh Tapley, a great viz on the way people the cause of their death, and cancer jumped out at me. In this case, I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, not far from the red area on this chart, but in a span of 34 years, the death rate, the mortality rate in that area was really stunning. And sometimes a chart will answer a question for you, but sometimes the chart asks a question. In this case, I was being asked a question like, what is happening in OWSLEY County? Why is that the highest rate of cancer increase in the country? And it just made me dive into the data. And so I went in and looked at the life expectancy of the counties in Kentucky. Again, this is probably an hour from my house by drive, but 20 miles down the road, there's a 10-year difference in life expectancy for people in Fayette County versus OWSLEY County. And I've never been to OWSLEY County. I didn't know anything about OWSLEY County. I thought maybe, okay, smoking causes cancer, and certainly smoking in that area of Kentucky is more. But I went to a Google map, and what pulled up was a coal truck. I mean, I literally, the Google streetcar was pulling up an image of a coal truck. And not only did it pull up the image in coal country here, the Google streetcar for 20 minutes driving down the road is actually following a coal truck. Like, what's the chances of that, right? Like, there's no coal truck on my street. There's no Google car, following a coal truck for 20 miles. And so that was the sort of the catalyst in my head to say, oh, well, there must be something else going on in this data. So I went and pulled other data. And it literally goes on for a long, long time, all the way until the truck, drops off its load. If I look at surface coal mines in the area, or look at all coal mines in the area, it became immediately evident of like what was going on. Why are some parts of Kentucky not having this increase in cancer rates, and other parts of Kentucky were having this increase in cancer rates? It's like, well, yeah, it's obvious of what is going on here. And by the way, if you smoke and work in a coal mine, your numbers are astronomical. And so, yeah, that popped out and was, kind of related.
So Jasper, I need to be mindful of the time. I want to have a brief interlude as to how we all met Seth, because it is somewhat a controversial discussion of what is considered, the greatest statistical graph ever drawn. And then, Seth, I want to give you enough time to tell people who want to do something what they can do about it. So, Jasper, anything you want to put a period on? Any final thoughts as we move to the infamous Menard chart?
I'll just say that we got to where we got with the book because of the contributions of everyone who was brave enough to step up and contribute. So to anyone on the team who's watching, thank you. We got here because of you. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, I'm also going to add, Seth, you created the conditions under which all these people could do wonderful work, and you also inspired us to do good work, and I think really brought out the best in us. It was just a clinic in leadership, and it was a privilege to just be a small part of this. So let me go ahead and share this. So the reason I met Seth is because I did a workshop with Jeff, and there was a discussion of this chart. And a lot of people here who are tuning in have seen this, and we know what this fellow had to say about it. Is this the best statistical graph ever drawn? And then Jeff made me aware of this absolutely brilliant presentation from 2006, and it wears well. You can watch I watched this, and it's like, this is great. This and Hans Rosling TED Talk from 2006 hold up. Jeff, can you comment on this, because this was eye-opening to me? And then Seth, you can weigh in for, of course.
I love it because I use it in my class, and I explain. I have the Menard graph framed. It's on my wall in my office. It's a beautiful piece of art, and it has lots of information on it. But I teach in the business college, and when I tell my students, I would never walk into an executive boardroom with a chart that I'd have to explain for 5 minutes on how to read it. And that's what Seth's message was. It's not that it's not a bad chart by any means. It's not Seth jokes it's one of the worst charts. Well, it depends on your audience. That's really what it comes down to. And if your audience is looking for that complexity and that detail, then by all means. But in the executive world, in the business world, more often than not, we just want fast and simple answers to something. And that chart is not a fast and simple answer to anything.
And in writing my book, The Big Picture, I contacted Seth and said, hey, I had not seen the video. I had only seen your transcription of what he said, and contacted Seth and said, hey, do you still feel this way? And am I okay articulating this? And you said, yes, absolutely. In fact, I feel even more that way. And that led to a discussion, and that led to me sending you a review copy of the book and you providing a blurb, and then getting invited to be part of the Carbon Almanac. So thank you, Jeff, for letting me know about this presentation. I do encourage people to watch it. Seth, any additional comments that you have about this?
Well, I didn't know I owed Jeff such a thank you for introducing us and for helping cause the change that this almanac is going to change. Here's the quick lesson for the people who have been patient enough to tune in and listen to Jasper's insights, which have been priceless. There's only one purpose to creating a chart, and that is to make a change happen. If you're not seeking to make a change happen, don't waste your time. Who are you seeking to change, and what is the change you seek to make? Who's it for, and what's it for? If you can't tell me who it's for, if you can't tell me what that person believes and wants and dreams and fears, don't start. What's it for? What is the change you seek to make? How are you hoping to influence the way they think going forward, how they understand? Who's it for and what's it for? And so the reason that I am so pushy about the chart is that Tufte has a lot of brilliant things to say. But when he stands up and says, this is the greatest chart ever, what he's saying is, who's it for? It's for super chart nerds who actually have never once changed their minds about the Napoleonic Wars. It is not for anybody who is going to change their mind. And so what I find is it's a dangerous distraction. No, we need no more USA Today charts that are irresponsible and not based on anything and poorly presented. But we also don't need more charts that it takes longer to understand the point than if I just told you the point. What we need in the middle is things that are based on verifiable facts and insight that will change the way someone understands the world in a language that they are ready to hear. Who's it for and what's it for?
Let me queue up a couple of things, then we'll have a couple minutes to discuss amongst us.
Sorry, I'll just counter. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, my laptop's. I've gone triple Menard today. I don't know if you can see the shirt and the picture in the background. And the only counter I'd say to Seth is, I think Hans Rosling established that in his TED talk that you can spend 5 minutes explaining the.
Oh, to the right audience, it's true. But if you have someone who's enrolled in the journey, and you say to them, "Let's go deep." If I'm teaching cardiology, I have more than 5 minutes to explain it. I can go deep, for sure. But most of the people who are on this call, that's not the audience you get to serve. So we need to be really clear who's it for and what's it for.
All right. I don't think we can end with much better than that. Amanda, if you could put my slides up for a minute, please. So let me just do a quick promotion of our upcoming chart chat. Thank you so much. This will be on July 14th. I think it will just be the four of us. I suppose we're going to have a very hard time topping the guest list. I will tell you that we are slated to have Charles Menard himself later this year. So that's fine. But at least for July 14th, I think it's going to be the four of us having delightful debates. And there's where you can go, bigpic.me/cc32. But we're going to end this in a moment. Here is where you can go to join the after party, bigpic.me/after31, where you can ask Seth and Jasper questions and we can banter and debate this. And Andy, you can try to make a point about the delights and wonders of the Menard chart, and we can all
Can I
have.
just insert one thing as you're wrapping this up? You asked me to talk for a second about what people can do, because when people hear this and they start getting upset, what can we do? It's super simple. What you can do, and again, I have no conflict of interest because I don't get a penny from this project, is you can talk about it. And you can go get 6 copies of this and you can hand them out to people because they're not going to buy it on their own. You can hand it to them and say, find 3 pages of this. Let's talk about it. Because we are not talking about it the way we should be talking about it. That is what you can do. Don't worry about composting. Don't worry about straws. Worry about changing the system. And the people who are on this call are great at explaining things. Go get a copy, 6 copies, and share them.
Okay, thank you so much, Seth. Thank you so much, Jasper, and my co-hosts. And let me just get that URL up there. We try to make it as easy as possible for you, bigpic.me/after. I will see you all there soon. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
everyone.
for all your time. It was great to see everyone, and thanks for joining us, to Seth and to Jasper.
Thanks for having me.